Thunder comes from lightning. Lightning is sparked by ideas. It's ideas and new businesses and businesses that do new things that are going to keep our economy running. Now, I love this little toy. It's great. No electronics to it. It's just a hollow tube, a drum head, and a spring hanging from it. But it makes a pretty decent sound. And if you give it to your grandchildren, it makes a lot of sound when you don't want it. But they love to experiment with it. The question is, where did this come from? Well, a friend of mine is a percussionist, and a few of you heard this last night, so please bear with me. And he was at a percussionist convention. And if you remember the old commercials about Excedrin headache number 352 or whatever, imagine 3,000 people in one room trying to pound on every surface they can find to see what kind of noises they can make, and that's a percussionist convention. And in this convention, Robert found somebody with a unit called a spring drum, about 18 inches in diameter, took two hands, you spun it around and made this great low volume noise of thunder. And he went to the owner and said, you know, that's really cool. I'd like to sell that. And the guy who had invented the spring drum said, nah, I'm selling all the symphonies, I'm selling all the orchestras, I'm probably selling 70 or 80 of these a year. I don't need any competition. So Robert looked at it, thought a minute, and said, how about giving me the right to sell to non-professional musicians? And the guy said, I don't care, give me a little royalty and we'll both be happy. So Robert went home, took the spring drum, shrunk it down so you could hold it in one hand, painted it with lightning bolts, renamed it a thunder tube, and in his first year proceeded to sell over 100,000. Now the question is, how many of you have spring drums in your warehouses, in your brain, in things that you see every day, waiting for somebody to realize that there's something else in there? Now, people have done this all the time, and there's some great examples. The one I like to use for my students, because they're of that era, is Steve Jobs. You remember the iPod? He didn't invent the iPod. The MP3 player had been around for 3 or 4 years. All he did was take a spring drum and make it into a thunder tube, renamed it the iPod, and got rich. He didn't invent the cell phone. Cell phones had been around for a dozen years. But he changed it, and he made an iPhone and made another fortune. Tablet computers had been around for a long time. He created the iPad, and what happened? It's become a new standard in business. So I am here to tell you, and I'm going to challenge you for about an hour and a half today, to start thinking about new things, about things that you see every day that you can change and make into something that will take you from a spring drum to a thunder tube. And by the way, later on, if you want, you can come up and play with these. These are lots of fun. So I want to, first of all, thank you all for attending. I looked out at this, and in St. Louis, we get a dusting of snow, and they close the city down. So what I saw come in on Monday night and Tuesday morning was terrifying. And by noon, it looked like it never happened. The streets were clear. You know, once you know what to do with it, you can do it very good. Now, you've just had lunch. You're wondering what's going on here. And I think it's time for a quiz. I always like to do quizzes in school. So it gets everybody thinking. You got to use your mind a little bit. So I'm going to ask some very simple questions, and I want you to just shout the answer back to me. What shape is a stop sign? Boy, this is not even kindy yet. We can do a little bit. What shape is a stop sign? Very good. What color is a stop sign?
Red.
What shape is a yield sign?
Triangle.
What color is a yield sign?
Yellow.
Are you sure? Do you realize that in 1972, a law was passed making yellow yield signs illegal in the United States of America? By 1974, 95% of them were replaced. By 1980, there were no yellow yield signs in the United States of America. Hard to believe, isn't it? This is how powerful the idea of a paradigm is. You learn to drive with yellow yield signs. You haven't seen one for 40 years, and yet you believe that they're out there. Think about that. I have to be very careful when there are young people in the room. What color is the yield sign? Red and white. They know it. Now, I've got to tell you something. When I first learned this, I drove around for 3 weeks looking for that god-darn yellow yield sign. And I couldn't find it. Now, maybe somewhere around Lake Superior, where it's been under snow for, 40 years, you might find one. But other than that, they're not out there. It's hard to believe, right? It's too hot. He said, no, when you, I want you to find, and by the way, anybody who ever finds a yellow yield sign, please send me a picture of it. You can't get them. You can even look this up. You can Google it all if you are on your little phones. You can Google. You'll see that they were eliminated in the early 70s. By the way, I would appreciate, on the Googles and the phone systems, because I teach the university, I used to try and stop that. And then it went under the desk. So I know, I can watch for the little veins on the side. And when those things are popping, I know you're thumbing the thing and you're texting. But I've gotten over that. The only time that bothers me now is when I see the driver next to me on the highway, and I see that, and I know they're not paying any attention to what they're doing. Well, here's what I'd like to start with. I'm going to try and challenge you to think about business and what's going on, so that when you walk away from here, it wasn't just a little bit of fun and you learned about a thing or two, but you can walk home with new ideas. There are things that you can work on. Back in the 60s, there was a very interesting article written in a paper called the Harvard Business Review. And the title was Marketing Myopia. Has anybody in this room heard of it? I see one nodding of the head. Marketing Myopia was very interesting because the premise of the paper was, if the railroads had been in the transportation business instead of in the railroad business, they would own the airlines. It's an interesting thing. Now, some people say, well, they're very happy they don't own the airlines today because they're a mess. But think of what would have happened if the airlines had become the transportation center of the country. What we would have had is probably high-speed rail connecting communities to a few long-distance airports, helping us go back and forth across the country, and we probably have a significantly more efficient transportation system than we do today. Now, another example that many of you may not know about, but happened, is Hertz. Now, everybody knows Hertz, the automotive rental company. They were losing their shirt. Now, for those of you who've got a few more gray hairs, you may remember a commercial. I'm sorry. I don't know whether her hair was gray or not. I've been with my wife. We've been together for almost 46 years. I have no idea what color her hair is. It's changed a few times over the years, but anyway, Hertz was starting to lose their lunch to a little company called Avis. And do you remember the slogan that Avis had? We try harder. And Avis was starting to beat them up, and so Hertz said, we've got to do something. And they called a friend of mine who actually lives in Minneapolis, and he went up to their board, and he asked them, what business are you in? And they said, we're in the car rental business. And he said, if that's the business you're in, then all you can do is compete on price with all the other car rental businesses. You have no differentiation. And they said, well, what business should we be? He said, well, that's what you have to decide. And I'll sit here and work with you, but it's not my decision. So they worked for about a day and a half, gnashing of teeth, screaming, yelling, talking about yellow yield signs because they didn't want to change. This is the way we've always done it. But they finally made a decision, and they said, we want to start a new business. And we're now going to be in the get out of the airport fast business. And they designed the Hertz #1 Gold Club. Now, I'm a frequent flyer, so I've got close to 3 million miles on all the various airlines. I spend a lot of time with rental cars. In the old days, if you remember, you'd stand in line, you'd give them your driver's license, they'd enter all the information, and you could wait a half hour to 45 minutes to get your 5-part form printed out on the Stop Matrix printer, and then finally go find your car. Well, they started this new club, and they actually charged for it at first. We paid $100, and for the $100, you could call in, make a reservation, And when you got to the airport, instead of standing in line, you went out to the gold aisle. And at the gold aisle, your names were up on a board, and it told you which spot your car was in. You could go to that spot because they knew what plane you were coming in. The trunk was open. Throw your suitcase in, get in the car. The key was already in there. The hanging from the mirror was your whole contract. You drove to the exit, gave them the contract, your license, and you were out of there in 10 minutes. It was wonderful. I was saving easily an hour. And you know what? Hertz charged me extra every day. But the extra was a couple bucks. It didn't matter to me. Most of my rounds are one day. So to pay $3 or $4 extra and get out of the airport in 10 minutes instead of 45 to 60 was a pleasure. Hertz suddenly started really taking off. Now, over time you got the emerald aisle and this aisle and that aisle because everybody's had to duplicate it. But once they understood what business they were in, that became a filter through which they tested all of their new ideas. So I was just recently in New Orleans. It's one word I found out. I was recently in New Orleans and I rented a car. And one of the things I do is I always walk around the car and mark any little scratches and stuff so when I bring it back I don't get charged for it. So I got to the exit and I said to the guy, here are the scratches. And he says, we don't do that anymore. We're testing a new system here. I said, oh yeah, what is it? And he pointed out there were cameras. There was a forward-facing camera, backward-facing, top side, and both sides. And you drove the car out. It took high-resolution photos of the car from every angle, and that film would be kept for 30 days after you returned the car. And if you came back with any damage, they could pull the film and see if that damage was there before you left or not. They just saved me another 5 or 6 minutes. Everything they do is to try and get you out of the airport fast. Now, what does that have to do with us? Everything. And this is going to be the first of a couple little exercises we're going to do. Because I want you, and most of you seem to be sitting with compatriots from the same company, I want you to ask yourselves first, what business are we in today? So you're in the hospital business, and what business should we be in? And I'm not sure what the answer is. But what I'd like to do is give you about 5 or 6 minutes, and I'd like each table to figure out what is your current business. It might be engineering, it might be healthcare, it might be construction. And then I'd like you to come back and think again and ask yourself, what business could I be in that would give me competitive advantage in my marketplace? I only got about 6 minutes, so let's get some conversations going, and I'll wander around in case you're having any trouble.
First part. All right, your turn, Peter.
Yeah. Ditto.
Let me try and call you back to order. It's fun when I do this for a full semester class because we get to take an hour with this. And what I teach is corporate entrepreneurship. This is for MBAs. They're all working for companies. They have real jobs. And their goal in my class is to create a project within 1 semester that will earn their employer at least $50,000, which is approximately what it costs to get an MBA at St. Louis University. And we make it happen over and over and over again. But it takes being willing to think of ideas and get into some of these conversations. So, may I pick on you? What business were you in up until we tried this exercise?
We're a surveying engineering firm.
A surveying engineering firm. What business do you think you should be in?
I think this customer service. I mean, that's all what we talked about here. That's all we talked about was customer service. How can we best serve our clients?
Okay, so they want to be in customer service. So the question that I would ask to help you focus it better, what service would you provide that would help your customers better than any other engineering firm in the area? Is it speed? I mean, that's what Hertz did, get out of the airport fast. Is it high quality? Is it low cost? What are the things that will set you apart? And the answers to that become a filter through which you measure all your ideas. They're really wonderful. How about from the hospital? You obviously were a hospital, because that's a safe assumption. What business do you think you should be in?
Instead of being in healthcare, you think it should be in wellness.
In wellness. So it's not just taking care of somebody after they're sick, but keeping them from getting sick. Now you guys are nodding, so you're also part of, you came up with this thing, geniuses think alike. Isn't that wonderful? How about this back table here? Are you willing to volunteer? Yeah, there's nobody behind you. You can't.
We're a sewing factory selling to mostly wholesalers. We're thinking we should be a sewing factory, maybe selling to retailers to increase our margin.
Okay, so they're talking about going from a sewing factory just to wholesalers to a sewing factory that can actually get to retailers and increase their market size. They're doing the same work, but by changing the definition, they open up new markets. How about this corner table here? Electronic manufacturing services provider. And what business do you think you should be in?
Well, we've already worked toward customer service
So they're working toward customer service. What kind of customer service?
that focused on success.
Focused on customer success. Now that's very interesting. There's a company in St. Louis, Marcone Appliance Parts. Some of you may have heard of them if you're in the appliance parts business. And they did something a few years back, and I was helping them with it. They felt, and I hope there's nobody here that buys from them, but they felt that they had the world's worst customers. And the reason they were the world's worst customers is these were mostly mom-and-pop operations that fixed laundry machines and whatever broke at home. And they would go to the local hardware store and shop a washer to go from 2 cents to 1 cent and think they were making money. So what they did at Marcone, a guy named Jim Sowers, who became president, the first non-family member who became president of the company because of this idea, he wrote a program to help the small mom-and-pop operation bid out their work. And then if they wanted to buy parts from him, it was basically one button and they did an electronic transaction and sold them the parts. But they had the markups. They said, look, if you follow our system, we're going to make you more money. Guess what? You don't have to go shopping for parts. We'll provide them. We'll give you standard markups on parts. We'll give you standard markups on your labor. And you know what their first answer was? We can't do that. We're going to be too expensive. And what Jim tried to explain to them, look, if a housewife with 3 kids has a broken washing machine, do you think she's going out for 3 competitive bids? If you're reasonable, they'll get the business. So they started trying it, and guess what? All of these people who use the Marcone system started making more money. They started making more calls. And guess what? It was so easy to just order from Marcone. Marcone went from one of the smallest players in the industry to having almost 60% of the total volume countrywide. That's power. And that's what it was, is they decided they wanted to make their customer more profitable. And once they changed the nature of their business, they took off. So I want you to keep playing with this idea. What can you do? How can you better define who you are, who your market is, who your customers are? Because one of the things I want to tell you is the future is not going to be a continuation of the past. I mean, if you think about it, my grandson, 3 years ago, when he was, I guess, 7 or 8, he came to me, it was the end of the year, they had been studying shapes at school, and he looks up and he says, Papa, how come we call pushing buttons dialing? If you don't think technology is moving quickly, think about that. He heard that dials were round. Buttons were in a square pattern. Why? He's never seen a dial telephone. Never. Go back almost 35 years ago when my oldest son was going around the house one day. He asked me what time it was, and I said, it's 15 to 11. And he looks up at me and he says, Dad, what's that in after? I had to stop and think. I have the only non-digital clock in the house. He wanted me to tell him it was 10:45 because he didn't understand 15 to 11. Okay, now that little kid's 40 years old. He can read a watch now. But it was scary at the time because this is how quickly things are changing. The world that we all grew up in is no longer there. And what I want to do is help you start to see the future. So Ken, before you get comfortable back there, it's just sitting down, I am going to pass out some coasters. And I know this is a little difficult for adults, but what I'd like to ask you to do is just put these down on the table in front of you. You can look at them, but don't start tearing them apart or playing with them, because I want you to wait till I get to the right part of the story. Yeah, you all get to take one. And you can turn them right side up, because they're much more meaningful if you can read the words. That will help you. Does everybody have one? So what I'm going to do, and then we're going to try some of this later, I am going to walk you through how to solve any problem that you come up with in business. And this will help you have a vision for the future. And again, for a couple of you who were here last night, bear with me, but if you didn't get it the first time, we'll make sure you got it the second time. So the first word on the coaster is diagnose. Diagnose is really critical, because my years in business, and I've been working since the late 60s, had my own business since 76, so I've been doing this for a while. And my business was consulting. I found that most people, when they came up with a problem, tried to solve a symptom instead of fixing the problem itself. And what happens when you put a Band-Aid on a symptom? The problem never goes away. It just shows itself somewhere else. So the first thing we have to learn to do is we have to learn to figure out what are the real problems that we're dealing with. And my favorite example, which again you heard last night, I was called in by a company to redesign their hiring system. And my favorite question happens to be why. So as soon as I got there, I said, why? And they said, well, we've got so much turnover, we can't get the paperwork done to keep new employees coming in fast enough, so we've got to automate this and make this better. And I looked and I said, but why? And they said, but why what? I said, why do you have all this turnover? And the owner of the company sort of looked at me quizzically, thought for a second, and said, because people quit. I said, no. Why do people quit? He didn't know. So I said, before we go building a system, let's figure out why people quit. So we did a quick survey. And what we found out is they were paying about 15% under scale for the area. So what would happen is they would hire the chronically unemployed. They would teach them a skill, teach them to show up for work every day, get them working well, and a year later, they could go anywhere in town for a 15% raise. I said, you don't need to design a new hiring system. You need to pay people more. And they said, we can't. And I said, why? And they said, well, our rules say we have these levels of employees and this is your grade level. And I said, BS. I told them what I was really thinking instead of just using the initials, but I can't get away with that in front of a public audience, so just use your imagination. And I said, that doesn't make any sense. Do you have any idea what it costs you to handle all the turnover? And they said, well, I'm not sure. I said, well, I want you to go calculate how many people are involved, what the advertisements cost, how much time it takes to interview, how much time it costs to train, what happens when you lose productivity because good people leave. And they came back about a week and a half later and they said, oh my gosh, we could afford to give everybody in the company a raise if we accept the turnover. I said, well, that's great. You don't have to. I mean, keep some for management, right? We don't mind the owners making a little extra. But I said, here's what you do. You hire people in, the same people, but 6 months later when they prove that they're interested and they prove they can show up for work, go ahead and give them a 5% of reward. 6 months after that, give them another 5%. Now at the end of the year, they've got maybe 11% compounded. You're still maybe 4% under scale, but guess what? They're not going anywhere. They're happy. And you can give them another raise and bring them up to scale 6, 10 months down the road from there. So I checked back a little over a year later. You know what happened? Turnover went to 0. Basically, the only turnover they had were people that they fired because they weren't making the grade. And they said, Steve, you were right. And all I had to do was a diagnostic to make sure I fixed the underlying problem. I could have given them a fast hiring system, but they still would have had all the other problems there. So what I would challenge you to do is whenever you find a problem in your business, step back, ask yourself why at least 5 times. That's what's going to help you get down and find out what the real problem is. Now the second word on here is focus. Focus is critical, especially for businesses of the size of most of you. We do not have sufficient change energy to solve more than 1 or 2 special things at a time. I mean, let's face it, you got to still run a business. If you try to do 5 things at once, you're going to have 5, half-assed results. It's just not going to work. Focus in. Find the thing that will give you the greatest return. Let me guarantee you, all of your other problems will wait for you. They don't disappear. They don't get bored waiting for you to solve them. They will sit there and they will keep poking you in the side. But if you focus on it and start from the beginning to the end and get it off the table, pretty soon you're going to be working on more interesting problems instead of the same old ones that you've seen every year since you started. The third word is solve. Once you have focused in and figured out what it is that you have to fix, now you have to do creative problem solving. And you can't use the same intelligence that you used to create the problem, because that won't get you out of the hole. This is where sometimes you bring in an outsider. This is where you listen to the young people. This is where you bring in somebody who's brand new in the business and have them help you do the solutions. And we're going to go back to solutions in just a moment. But the fourth word is absolutely critical: manage. You can have the best ideas in the world, but if you do not manage the process to success, to conclusion, you're going nowhere. And how many of you had a great idea and then you get back to the office and so many things happen it gets to the back burner? Anybody ever? Okay, so just a small little chuckle. Let me give you an example. I mean, I like to think of Americans as whack-a-mole managers. Anybody remember the game Whack-a-Mole? Okay, so think about this. In the morning, you're getting up. It's a beautiful day, a little snowy, but a beautiful day, and you're thinking about those 3 things you're going to get done today, and you are energized. You can't wait to get to the office. You drive to the company, you walk in the front door, the receptionist hands you your mallet, and you go sit at your desk. As soon as you sit down, the phone rings. Whack, first mole. Second thing, you get 6 emails. Whack, 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 whack. More moles are done. Some of you are still getting faxes. Whack, whack, whack. Pretty soon, your arm is just almost flying invisibly. You can't pound these fast enough. And then all of a sudden, it gets quiet. And you look up at the clock and you see it's 5 o'clock. But right next to the clock is the score. And today, you got 478 out of 500 moles, and you're thinking, yes, it was a good day. And then at the back of your desk, a giant mole pops up. And there's a piece of paper in his mouth. And what do you think is written on that piece of paper?
3 things.
The 3 most important things you were going to do that day, and the moles win again. Anybody ever feel that way? Absolutely. So manage becomes critical, because without that last step, all of your thinking, all of your ideas, everything you're trying to do doesn't work. Now, we call this the management puzzle for a reason. There's a puzzle here. So the next thing I'd like to ask you to do is please punch out the pieces of the puzzle on the table in front of you. Okay, so I'm going to come over. Oh, you're separated. Now, it's very interesting. When I look at people who put the puzzle out in front of them, some keep it as a single piece. Okay, you're missing 2 pieces. You don't even want to take them out because she wants to make sure that's like her hint. Okay, and Carrie here has the pieces of her puzzle maybe a 1/16 of an inch apart. Now, do you want to watch Carrie get real nervous? Watch this. Now, I noticed you stirred them up right away. Okay, the kids don't. Look at that. Stir them up. I'm going to come over there and mess them up with you. Okay? Now, the question is, why do we do that? Why? We do that because we've been taught since early childhood that it's bad to be wrong. Think back to that first day in grade school. The teacher asks a question. Young kid raises their hand, takes a chance, gets the wrong answer. Does the teacher come over and say, "Congratulations for trying"? No, the teacher stands up in front of the class and says, "Okay, is there anybody in this room smart enough to know the right answer?" And you never try again. We send our kids to school as question marks and we graduate them as periods. We beat the creativity out of them. Folks, it's okay to be wrong. The only people who are never wrong are people who never do anything. So everybody, stir up the pieces of your puzzle, okay? Mess them up, get them apart. Because the next thing I'm going to tell you, the next thing I want to tell you is for most people, if I tell them to solve the puzzle, they're going to say, okay, the first thing Steve said was diagnose, so one way or another, that goes here in the upper left-hand corner. As soon as you do that, you are doomed to failure. And you're doomed to failure because of this piece, the framework. As long as you try to solve tomorrow's puzzle in yesterday's framework, the best you can get is yesterday's answer. So what I want you to do is set the framework aside. And instead of putting together a coaster like everybody else in the world, I want you to assemble a three-dimensional cube. There are 6 sides to a cube, there are 6 pieces to the puzzle, and the only hint you get is all of the words face out, because that's good advertising. Now, I did have a gentleman after one of these classes send me a note back afterwards. He said, "You know, I took this thing home. My 8-year-old daughter did it in under a minute. I hate you." It was unsigned. I had another person take an X-Acto knife to all the little tabs. He glued the thing together and said, "Here's your blankety blank puzzle," and I have kept that on my desk because I thought that was such a great solution. But now I want you to get yours together. Now, Ken, you've seen this too many times. You don't get the award for being first one. Oh, you okay? Stand up.
He cheated. He was here yesterday.
Well, that's okay. Stand up. Okay. What's your first name?
Kevin.
Kevin. What's your first name? Okay. So Kevin and Linda have theirs together. They're holding them up in the air. What are they doing? They're floating. They got the answer. Nobody else does. Ken's got it in the back. Oh, you got it too, and you are Andy. Okay, so now I want you to help everybody else get to your table, get them put together. We are a team in the community. We work together. We help each other. No, this is not cheating. You can share off of each other. That's just good competitive intelligence. So let me have your attention for one quick second here, because somebody said, "Oh my gosh, this isn't working the same." Folks, just because they look the same, some puzzles are different. Some are printed this way, some are printed this way, some are printed on the back. So you may have to look beyond the words to the shape of the pieces, but they do fit together. Look, use your block.
And I'm the engineer in the group. Yes. Yes. This made my day. I'm the non-mechanical one here. The non-engineer did.
You got yours all done?
I'll be stuff.
Next time you tell me you can't come up on the floor, I'm just gonna
They're really struggling. Nobody there has it together.
That digit lock would have
Go
been.
on.
Come on, your poor patience in God.
Take yours with you. You may need it.
starting.
Have you given up?
No, I started over. I got
Okay.
4 or 5.
Yeah, well, good. That's a good way. By the way, there's something I just heard. Somebody said I got 4 together and the 5th one didn't fit anywhere. There are no shapeshifter pieces in the puzzle. You start over. It's okay to be wrong.
God, we did this last night.
Your job was on the line.
I felt like it was.
This is the 2 that I
All you needed me to do was pick it up.
Okay, so if we can get anybody who didn't get it figured out yet, I will help you after the break at the end. One of the times, and this can be, I actually did this puzzle for the St. Louis County Police, and when I went in there, I was warned by, there's a gentleman who had hired me, we actually went through what we were going to do. He said, let me just tell you something. The chief hates to lose any contest. And the chief always carries a loaded pistol. I gave him a solved cube under the table so he could be the first one. Self-preservation has a big meaning. Okay, this is an interesting little puzzle. I mean, when you think about it, there are 2 ways to solve one puzzle. And I don't know what the guy was smoking, but obviously he'd grown up in the 60s. Because that took some real weird thinking to come up with a puzzle that can be done in 2 different dimensions. But think about the lessons that are in the puzzle. Lesson number 1, it's okay to be wrong. How many of you have sometimes decided on a path you were going to take, and even though it maybe wasn't going the way you wanted, you kept going because you had made the decision? Look, if something isn't working out, stop, tear it apart, start all over again. That's okay. Number 2, even though the puzzles look the same, some of them may be a little different. So it's okay to be looking at what your competitors are doing, but understand sometimes what they're doing, they may have a few different colored pieces, they may have a few different shapes, they may have a few different words, but that doesn't mean you should stop looking. It just means you need to be aware. We also learned that gloating is fun, but non-productive, okay? If you have an answer, share it with people, because guess what? Your one answer is going to help find many others in the building. Now, I did have to come over here, and we did understand that the smarter you are, the harder it is to solve the puzzle, right? So that was, we can make people feel but here's the real meat to the puzzle. Everybody in your business, whatever it is, has the same pieces of the same puzzle. The difference between the winners and the losers in any industry is, are you putting together coasters like everybody else, or are you creating cubes of competitive advantage? It's when you find the cubes that you have the opportunity to exceed beyond your wildest imagination and take over in any industry. So what I'd like to do is we're going to take a quick 4 or 5 minutes, I'd like you to take one person at your table, because you all have different issues that you're working on, and I'd like that one person to say, the biggest problem I think I have is, and then I want everybody else at the table to help them ask why over and over again, and see if you can help them go from a symptom of a problem to what the real problem is itself. It's a good exercise. If you practice doing this and then take it back to your companies, it will help you move to making progress on so many levels, it's unbelievable. So let's take about 6 minutes, pick one person at your table, come up with a problem, and work it down to the real problem. Do the diagnostic. That's wrong. You gotta know who you are, because no company can be successful with just L's. If you have a whole bunch of L's in the company, all you're gonna do is have a bunch of arsonists trying to kill each other because each of them wants to be in charge with the best idea. You're never going anywhere. If you have a bunch of D's in the company, you've got no management, but you're getting things done, sometimes. Well, L's, let me tell you sort of the difference between them. D's, and by the way, you can be a capital L, a lowercase l, or no L. Capital M, lowercase m, no M, capital D, lowercase d, no D. D's, or doers, are people who get things done. These are the go-to people in your organization. A capital D is somebody who says, give me a task and get out of my way. Give me the resources, get out of my way. Get rid of all the roadblocks, get out of my way. D's love to do things, and D's are wonderful. You can't have an organization without them. Leaders say, here's where we're going. I've got a vision. Leaders want to be loved. Okay, they're usually very good salespeople, and they sell their ideas to people. People say, oh, I buy into that idea. I want to follow you. But leaders, because they want to be liked, are terrible managers. Most leaders couldn't manage their way out of a paper bag if they had to. Managers, on the other hand, a capital M is somebody who gets things done through other people. They kick butt and take names. They tell the leader, you tell me which hill to take, give me the resources, I'll assemble the team, I'll give the individuals instructions, get out of their way except to support, coach, and mentor them, and give me a group of doers who will do what they're supposed to do. That's an organization who gets things done. But let's look historically at how organizations get started. Normally, when you've got a new business started, you've got somebody who is a capital D and a little l that says, you know what, I am really good at what I'm doing. Whether it be civil engineering, it might be nursing, it might be, whatever it is, they say, I am really good at doing this stuff. I'd love to have my own business. I'm going to start something. And they start something. And because they're a capital D, they're successful at doing it. And all of a sudden, people start coming to them and say, hey, will you do this? Will you do that? So they say, oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. All I know are D's, so I'm going to hire another capital D to help me get stuff done. Well, that's great, but now things are getting busy. Well, let's hire a little d. Well, we need another d. Well, we need another d. Well, I got a capital D. How about some more D's and some more D's? And pretty soon, you have an organization structure that looks like this. And the capital D, little l at the top, is moving further and further away from doing, which sometimes upsets them, because they really like to get things done. They want to do the computer work. They don't want to do anything else. And so they start saying, I can't take this anymore. So I need to have a manager. So what do? They say, look, I'm going to take my first hire, who was a capital D. You're my best friend. You've been here the longest. I want you to suddenly become my manager. I'm going to put you here, and everybody else is going to report to you. Well, what happens? All of these D's said, you're one of us. I'm not reporting to you. So if I need something done, I'm going to go around you. And it just doesn't matter. I'm going to report up to the original guy because you don't really count. You're not really a manager. And then what happens? You have this. And nothing gets done because your leader is stymied. They're spending all their time working in the business, none of their time working on the business, and nobody's making sure things get done. The only way to solve this is not take some D and bring them in and say you're a manager. but it's to hire a capital M. And you take this capital M and you say you have all of these D's and you're going to report up to me because I'm going to become a capital L little d, and we're going to make things start happening. I know with my own company, when I understood this change, it really made a difference. That's when I started making money because I stopped trying to be the manager. I'm not the manager. I'm the idea guy. I can't manage. And as I've gotten further away from doing it, it's harder and harder to do. I mean, the fact that I can still hold a punch card up to the light and read the holes in it has no value. None whatsoever. I don't even know the programming languages the kids are using today. But I know much better than they how to use all of these tools in business. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to give you, this is just to yourself. You got about 1 minute. I want you to think, who am I? So myself, I used to be a capital D, little l. Now I think I'm a capital L, little d. I have absolutely no M. I'd like you to just take a minute and think about who you are. Are you a leader? Are you coming up with ideas? Are you setting the vision for your company? Are you a manager? Do you kick butt? Do you take names? Are you able to get things done through other people? Or do you love doing? Do you just want to have somebody clear all the roadblocks, give you a clear definition of what you got to do, and then get out of your way so you can have a wonderful life doing? Think about who you are. Now, once you have that bit of information, and by the way, you can be part L, M, and D. Once you have that bit of information, you are now armed to start making a change in your business. If you think things don't get done because you don't have the right structure, here's what I'd like you to do. Now, you all work for the same company, you work for the same company, you got a little bit of a mixture here. Are you all for the same company? These are the same company? Do you three all work? You're all the same company there? You're the same company back there? You are here? Okay, so here's an exercise I'd like you to try. This is difficult, it's not easy, but it's worth trying. If you had a blank sheet of paper and you could redesign the organizational structure of your company using just L, M, and D, no names. No names. Don't worry about, well, where are we going to put Susie? Don't worry about where Susie's going to go. No names, just L, M, and D's. What would your organization look like? I'm going to give you a couple hints. Normally, in the most successful organizations, at the very top, you have capital L's. They can have D, they can have M, but you need to have people who are giving you vision. Normally, under the capital L's, you need some capital M's and some little m's at different departments who are making sure things get done. And under them, you need a strong set of D's, capital and lowercase d's, to make sure the work gets done. So in a hospital, normally, these D's down here are your best docs. They're not leaders, they're not managers, they are great doers, and they're proud of it. And they're the ones who generate the revenue. They're the ones who make people healthy. They don't want to deal with the politics. They don't want to deal with the management. They don't want to deal with future vision. They want to help people get better. Those are capital D's, and they're important. So I want you to think about what would the structure of your organization look like if you had utopia and if you could start over today with a blank sheet of paper. Take about 5 minutes and just play with that in your teams.
But it is a position they have to
About 1 minute. 1 minute.
Your public forums in your position.
Okay, let me call you back to order. This is like class I gotta wait for. That's like, I love it. That's it. People keep talking about this because this is good stuff. Okay? Now, We've only got an hour and a half together today. I am throwing at you pretty much a semester's worth of material. That's not all going to be the right answer or the next thing that each of you should do, but I'm hoping that each of you will walk out with one or two ideas of things that you can do when you get back to work. What's the basis of this? This sort of brings us to where we're going all day. Teamwork for the future. Teamwork cannot be done just with D's, it cannot be done just with M's, it cannot be done just with L's. You have to have a combination. You've got to put people in positions so they can succeed. I've heard this a couple times. You've got to have managers who will clear the decks so the doers can succeed. If I can use the hospital example, it's the doctors. If you don't have people taking care of the scheduling and making sure the ORs are ready and that everything is in place, no matter how good the docs are, they can't do their job. So we've got to have managers that make it easy for the docs to do their job. Now, some people would say, well, hospital doctors are at the very top. No, doctors shouldn't be at the top. Most of them are not leaders. They don't want to be leaders. They want to be practicing medicine. That's what they went to school for. That's what they're good for. Engineers, construction people, nurses, whatever field you're in, get the right people in the right positions, and you're going to succeed wonderfully. Now, there are a couple things I want to do before I wrap up. The first thing is, because I've thrown so much material at you, any questions? Is anybody still awake? Oh yeah, that's good to hear. But go on.
Okay, here's a question. What if we want capital L to, how do we help our capital L really be a capital L?
Cool question. How do we help our capital L really be a capital L? That's a $64,000 question, because most of them is, I'm sorry? More money. More money. Yeah.
I'm all for that.
I'm a capital L, and one of my problems is money doesn't mean that much to me. Okay? I flunked retirement. I've started businesses because it's fun. But you know what? I teach now for St. Louis University. I make in a year what I used to make in a day. I don't care. I'm having too much fun doing it. So my motivation is much different. Okay? So money is not what's going to normally help the L. L's want to be loved. They want people to follow them. And what you can do is if you help, that's you? Oh, that's her. What you can do, one of the things you do for an L is you say, look, we need you to step back. We need you to work on the business, not in the business. You know, if you read my book, and you've all got copies of this about getting from do to done, okay, we had in here one of the things, there was an L who felt he had to sign every check. We talked about this last night. And he was spending all of his time signing checks because he felt that gave him a feel for what was going on in the organization. Except I asked him, do you look at each one? He says, no, I don't have time. Have you ever refused one? He says, no, I don't have time. They put everything together. It's got all the paper I just signed. So I said, why are you doing it? Because that's my job. No, that's not your job. Let's give it away. Oh, I can't give it away. I own the company. I said, yeah, you can give it away. So we started out and we set a $500 limit. He would not sign any check under $500 because he'd never turned one down. So all of a sudden he started doing that and he got rid of half the checks he was signing. He says, this is pretty good. I said, well, let's raise the limit to $1,000. He said, ooh, that's a little scary. I said, okay, $5,000. That's scarier. Okay, $10,000. No, I'll go back to $5,000. You know, he didn't want to challenge me anymore because the number was going to get too big. So now he signs a half dozen checks a week. He's looking at the big checks that he should be looking at. Everything else just processes through. So sometimes what you have to do is you have to give them permission to let go of what they always believed they had to do. And that's sometimes hard because they don't know they need to be a capital L. They think they got to be L, M, and D. They got to do it all because they're the head of the company. And they don't have to do that. And that's a self-discovery thing. And sometimes what you need is an executive coach, somebody they can look at and feel good is giving them good information they can be competent with to help them make that transition. But that is an excellent point. How about other questions?
Another question I have is, okay, so now with this world of having systems, you know, and like regional structures and system structures, and you might be an L someplace that you're looking at.
Okay, so you might be an L
Structure.
someplace and not somewhere else. Well, first of all, some of these structures that we have created recently are artificial and they don't work. But again, we're like that kid in school or the person who's putting together the cube. You're afraid to admit you've made a mistake, so you keep going down the path until it finally destroys you. If the structure that you've set up isn't working, have the guts to step back and say, enough is enough, we've got to do something different. And experiment. Don't be I mean, we have something that we teach now in the MBA program called accelerated failure. That sounds really scary, but it works. We want to take ideas and try them, and if they're going to fail, we want them to fail quickly so we can eliminate them. But if they succeed, then we want to keep improving and improving them. And accelerated failure is really the way of the future. You've got to be willing to do that. You've got to be willing to take chances. You know, it's like, you know, tomorrow's just not going to be a repeat of yesterday. It's not going to happen. So what worked yesterday will not necessarily work tomorrow. Okay? Were you here at the beginning? Because I didn't see you sitting. So is this a neat little toy? It's a cool toy. Okay? It was a mistake. Somebody took what somebody else had designed and changed it, and took it from something that sold 70 or 80 a year and turned it into something that makes $1 million a year profit. Okay? Sometimes you have to be willing to change what's out there. Now, in fact, you know what? With the snow and everything, this whole thing has cost the college a little more than expected. I don't know if this is fair to do. You know, I only have one of these, but I'd be glad to auction it off if somebody would like to make a donation to the college. Okay? These things will cost you $15 to $20 in the store. So if I start at $20, would anybody give me $20 for one of these? No? Come on. Okay, we got $20. So I have $25. Somebody raise somebody else's hand. Who would pay? Come on. Would you pay $25 for one of these? Yeah. Okay, I got 25. How about 30? Anybody willing to go to 30? Come on. How's the construction business?
Terrible, but sure.
How about 35?
He's bidding on something, I'm going 35.
I got 35. How about 40? Anybody give me 40? Anybody give me 40?
Uh-oh.
Going once? Going twice? You $40. Write a check to the college, and they will say thank you very much. Here's your thunder too.
Walk in the office and the work.
Well, you know, I've been seeing people, they have bells when you get a sale. Why not come in? Make thunder. If you get a new sale, we come up with a new idea, we do somebody gets to make thunder. That could be one of the new rewards. Okay. The other thing is you all have copies of the book. Now we've donated the books. You got that as being a sponsor and coming to lunch. There are extra books here if anybody would like to buy them. I think they're listed at $17. I think the university wants 11. If anybody needs extra books for any of their employees, pay anything over $11 and I'll autograph it. How's that? And they're all donations. Just write your checks to the college, because all of this is to try and keep the entrepreneurship program going. I can tell you my own belief is that's the future of our economies, entrepreneurs. One of the things that I've done at St. Louis University is we started a program called Starting a Single Shingle Shop. I gotta say it slowly because it's easy to trip it up. And the idea is there are a lot of people like me, you know, we're of retirement age but don't want to retire. So we're setting up, we're helping people who are unemployed and underemployed to create one-person businesses. Keep the economy going, stay out there, stay engaged, have fun, stay young. Okay, let me bring this to sort of a conclusion, then I'll stay up here and I'm glad to talk with all of you for about the next 10 minutes. But if I can ask one favor of you, keep your eyes open, talk to young people, and whatever else, Don't let a yellow yield sign block your vision of the future. Thank you very much.
No, I just want to thank Steve and thanks for the last part. The cool part of this is when Beth and I started this 4 years ago, is our entrepreneurial center, other than Beth and my time, we wanted this to be literally a separate entity of the college. Obviously, we both work for the college, but all of the dollars we raise stay in the center, and it goes to host another event like this, smaller breakfast events, things of that just kind of keep the energy going. So, in the spirit of that, that's what that's all about. So we're not like, hey, we want you to give all this money, but certainly to understand, that, and I'm sort of that other end. It's we appreciate the support and know that everything we do is funded by donations. It doesn't cost the college a cent other than Beth and my time. So, and of course the foundation supports us each year. This is the second year they've supported the lunch. So we're just grateful for that. So certainly if you need some extra books, and it'd be great if you could contribute up to $11, but if you want a couple extras, that's fine as well. But certainly remember, everything you do does go back into the center. It's going to help us continue to do this. So with that being said, again, thank you all. Thank you to the business leaders in this room, and for bringing your employees and your leaders and your managers and all those people that help make what you do possible. So we're grateful for your support. Again, want to thank Steve for a great program.
And thank Marla for
and Marla and Linda and Beth
and Beth for helping to put all this together and having that vision.
It's just great stuff.
You guys have a resource here in this community that is just unbelievable. Take advantage of it.
And if you're interested, I have some of my cards, but if anyone is interested in working with the center, we did, Beth I think mentioned in the beginning, we have sort of the Business Bridge Group, which is really just a collection of minds in the area looking to continue to grow the entrepreneurial spirit and programming. So if you're interested in that, we generally try to get together once a month for coffee over at Steve Creek Coffee Shop or Sharon's Coffee Shop, to kind of split it between the two. And just have some coffee for about an hour or so, talk about some ideas that we have, and then we actually want to implement those. So if you're interested, just grab a card, shoot me an email, and let me know. Steve will also be happy to obviously sign any of the books you want, and we'll go from there. So have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy the weather, and thanks for being here.
Have a good day.
Grab a soda or whatever on the way out, too. So.